channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be doing another dinosaur. I thought it'd be a lot of fun to do a Mosasaurur, plus I kind of wanted to do a water creature, but I'm also in the mood to do a dinosaur, and it was the first thing to come to mind and I thought it'd be really fun. Anyways, let's get started. Okay, so the main thing that I want to get out of making this doll is making a mouth that actually opens, and I figured since most of the body for this piece can be plush, we won't have to worry about any other clay pieces and we can focus on making that mouth actually open. Now the main thing that we have to worry about with making a mouth that opens is how the clay pieces are going to touch and kind of rub together, because even though our clay does bake very strong, it is going to be fragile, so it can't handle a lot of friction. So I really can't just make a hinge and have it to where both clay pieces are connected directly through the clay. We're going to have them separate but look like they're still connected. So what that means is we're going to have to make the bottom jaw separate from the rest of the head. So normally when I make my clay heads, I start with a lump of tinfoil for the base and I cover it up. So instead of just doing one lump of tinfoil, I divided the design between two lumps of tinfoil that would kind of mesh together very well. So it's very similar to how I make my heads, except we're going to have to make two pieces for one head. So of course I gotta get my two lumps of tinfoil completely covered in clay, smoothed out, and then we can start refining the shape of the head. So I'm kind of working on both pieces at the same time, and I figured it'd be easier to start with the inside of the mouth first, since we have to focus on these two pieces meeting up so neatly. It'd be easy to get that portion done first, and then we can work on the outside portion of the head. So the main thing I want to do with the inside of the mouth is I want to define where the lips would be, and then I want to add texture to the roof of the mouth and then the bottom jaw portion of the mouth. And then of course we have to add a tongue as well, so we're going to add a little piece of clay there and just kind of refine the shape of it. And then once we have everything kind of detailed, we can add some texture and then move on to the outside portion of the head. So of course the top of the head is going to have a lot more detail than the bottom jaw, so we're going to start on that first. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define where we're going to put our eyes. So I'm just going to kind of mark that out, and then I'm going to add some clay balls for the eyes and start building up clay around them to make the eyelids. Now with these eyes, I want to go a little smaller than I normally go. Normally I go a little bit larger than this, but I want to give the illusion that the mouth is larger than it actually is, so the best way to do that is to make the eyes really tiny. Of course, the mouth is still very large, but I wanted to emphasize it just a little bit more. So I'm going to get those eyes in place, and then I also want to add some wrinkles around there for detail, and then I kind of want to have the eyes a bit more sunken in, so I'm going to start building up clay around the eyes. That way they look a bit more set into the skull than they actually are. And then while I was at it, I wanted to kind of square off the top of the mouth a bit more, so I started adding a little bit of clay to the sides of it and just kind of making it a bit more boxy. Lastly, I'm going to add the nostrils to the very front of the snout, and then I'm going to start adding some texture to the rest of the face. So we're going to kind of rough everything up and then kind of add some scales here and there. I figured it would be best to focus the scales more around the lips than anything else, and the rest of the design is going to be just kind of a little bit wrinkly and stuff, because I figured this would be more like how a whale would be, and it's not going to have a lot of like thick scales, but I do want to have a little bit of scaling to it. And then before we move on to the bottom jaw, I'm going to start adding some holes inside the mouth for where we're going to put some teeth. I'm not going to be making them out of clay, I'm going to be making these out of Instamorph, which is a type of moldable plastic. So we're going to add that after we get all the painting and stuff done. But I do need holes set into the clay, that way I have a place to push in the teeth. Okay, so what we have left right now is mainly the texture and detail of the bottom jaw. So we're going to kind of do the same thing that we did with the top jaw, and we're going to add some scaling around the lips, and then we're just going to kind of rough up the texture of the skin, and then kind of wrinkle the very bottom of the throat so it looks a little bit squishier. And then once that's done, we're going to do the same thing that we did to the top jaw. We're going to add some holes where we're going to put teeth later. Now we're going to take our clay pieces and we're going to bake them for roughly about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Okay, so our clay pieces are out of the oven and have cooled to touch, and we can start on our painting. So I figured a good color for a mosasaur would be like red, because I figured it would make it look a little bit more menacing or something. I don't know, I just kind of wanted to do something red. I haven't done a red creature in a while. So anyways, we're going to be using reds, burgundies, and blacks for this piece. And then of course we're going to add some more pinky colors to the inside of the mouth. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get everything kind of primered with a first layer of paint. So we're just going to cover everything with a nice red. So I'm just going to go over absolutely every portion of the face. We're going to get into every little nook and cranny, and then we're going to let this dry for a little bit before we add our extra layers. Now I'm not really using a primer, I'm just kind of doing my first layer of paint over everything. This kind of helps all the other layers of paint stick to it, and it just makes it a lot easier to get the details in once we have a base color down. And then once that's dried, we're going to start adding some blacks, some darker reds, and then of course if we want we can add some highlights here and there if we want to brighten areas up. And then like I said, the inside part of the mouth is going to be a lot more pink, but we're also going to use a lot more brighter reds in there as well. Okay, so now that I'm kind of happy with how the basic colors are looking, I'm going to start on the eyes. So I'm going to start on the eye now, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to completely cover the eye with a nude color. So I want to kind of brighten it up, but I want it to start off being a little bit dull. So it's kind of like a muddy orangey brown color right now. And then I'm going to add some brighter oranges on top of this after that's dried. The reason I'm going with an orange is I figured this would stand out really well against the red, but not be like too contrasty. Now this is a little trick that I like to do with my eyes. I like to take a plastic straw and dip it into the paint and then just kind of push it onto the eye. And this kind of creates a nice little ring where we can put the pupil. This just kind of helps mark out where we want the pupil a bit, and then we don't have to freehand it as much. It kind of gives us a little bit of a kind of a basic guideline to follow. So we're going to let this little ring of paint dry, and then after it's dried we're going to fill in the middle with black to define the shape of the pupil. And then we can add a white highlight to the eye, and then after we're done with the actual eye, we can start adding some highlights around the eyelids and stuff, and just defining the features around it. So after I'm done with the painting and it's dried a little bit, I can start adding our teeth. Now like I said before, we're going to be making these out of Instamorph, so I just took a little bit of the moldable plastic and rolled out some teeth shape, and then I'm just going to be gluing them into those holes that we put into the clay. After those have dried into place, I'm going to be resining over the whole surface of the bottom and top jaw. This resin coat is going to help protect the paint, and it's also going to kind of lock in those teeth that we've glued into place. So it's kind of like an extra bit of glue around those teeth. So resin takes about 24 to 48 hours to cure, so we're going to start on the sewing now. Okay, so on to the sewing. Now the sewing for this is actually going to be very similar to our last piece that we did, which was the bearded dragon. The only thing different is the body is going to be kind of more stretched out and less pudgy. So basically we're going to have a top and a bottom which are going to be the same, and we're also going to be doing the same thing with the sides. And then we have a front set of fins and a back set of fins. So I'm going to get all my fabric cut out, and while I was doing this I decided that I wanted to have some scales going down the fins. So I got some fake black leather out, and I'm going to be using this to make the scales. So we're going to take our fabric patterns and we're going to draw out how we want the scales to go down the fins, and then we're going to pin this to the fake leather, and then we're going to sew around each scale. And of course, to make it nice and easy, we're going to use our sewing machine. Once we're done with that, we're going to cut all the excess leather off of it, and then we'll have our scales. Now before we start sewing everything together, I'm going to be doing a little bit of painting on some of the fabric pieces, that way we just don't have one flat color for the body. So I want to do the back of the piece and the tops of the fins, so I'm going to get these all nice and damp, and then I'm going to start going over it with some black paint. And then I'll also add a highlight to it with a little bit of brighter red paint. We're going to have to let this dry overnight. Once our fabric is dried, we can start putting our pieces together. So technically the first bit of sewing that I'm going to be working on is going to be the fins. They're basically super simple, and I figured let's just get them out of the way real quick. So for the fins, I'm just going to take the top and bottom of each fin, pin them together, and we're going to sew all the way around them. Of course, make sure to leave an opening at the end, that way you can flip your fin right side out. So I decided that I wanted to add a little bit more detail to the top of the creature and to the tail, so I'm going to take some felt pieces that I cut out, and I'm going to be sewing it down the back of the creature, and we're going to be sewing it around the end of the tail. So for the back, we're just going to have this wavy strip, and we're going to just cut a line right down the middle of the back and sew it into place. For the tail, I have another piece of wavy cut felt. The only thing different is it does have a curve, so it can go around the end of the tail. So I'm going to be pinning this in place right between the two layers of the tail, and we're going to go all the way around the tail. Now I actually need our tail to be inside out still for the rest of the sewing, but I wanted to show you guys what the end looks like real quick. So I'm going to flip it right side out, and then I'm going to flip it inside out again. Anyways, let's continue sewing the rest of the body. So I'm going to take the top and bottom of the creature, and we're going to sew this to the sides of the creature. So we're going to close everything up. And because these lines are fairly straight, I'm going to be pinning my fabric together and using my sewing machine to save me a little bit of time. Normally I do this type of sewing by hand, but because everything is super straight, it's just going to be a whole lot easier if I do the sewing machine. Okay, so the body is put together. Now we need to figure out where the fins go. So you'll notice we don't have any holes for them yet, so we're going to be marking out where we want to connect them, and then we're going to cut some little slits into the side and sew the fins into place. I'm also going to be cutting open the belly a little bit. I'm just going to cut right down the middle of it. And this is going to make putting everything together a lot simpler, especially since I want to have a wire frame for it. Okay, so I'm going to take all 4 of my fins and I'm going to stuff them nice and firm. Then we're going to take them and we're going to put them inside of the body, make sure they're facing the correct way, find the hole for each fin, and we're going to sew all the way around them, connecting them to the body. Okay, so our body is all done. We can flip everything right side out, and now we're going to start working on the head a little bit so it's ready to add to the body. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to connect the bottom jaw to the top jaw. So I'm going to have a very simple wire frame for this. So for that wire frame, what I did was I made 2 wishbone shapes. One is for the top jaw and one is for the bottom jaw. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the 2 pointed ends for each wishbone shape and we're going to push it into the back of the top jaw and the bottom jaw and glue it into place. Then we're going to take our thinner gauged wire and we're going to connect the 2 wishbones together. As you can see, our pieces don't actually touch, so we don't have to worry about anything rubbing and paint coming off or anything, but they do look like they're kind of closed. So they don't close completely, but they're pretty close to doing it. So while we're working on the wireframe, I'm going to continue making the rest of it for the body. So basically what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take a long piece of wire for the spine and we're going to connect it off of the wishbones. This is going to go all the way down the length of the creature. Now I'm going to wait a little bit for the wires for the fins because I think they'll be kind of in the way while I'm working on the head. So what we need to do is we need some fabric to go in between the 2 pieces of clay. So what I did was I drew out a very basic shape and it kind of looks like a bow tie. And the reason it looks like a bow tie is because the sides of the face need to pull apart from each other further than the middle of it. So the inside portion of this is going to be a black fabric, and then I have a little bit of a dark pink fabric that's going to be for the outside portions. So I'm going to take my sewing machine and I'm going to connect these 3 pieces together. Once these pieces are sewn together, we can start adding them to the face. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to open the Mosasaur's mouth and we're going to glue this fabric connecting the 2 pieces of clay together. So I'm going to glue this to the top jaw and the bottom jaw. And then the side pieces of fabric are going to be glued into place as well. They're going to go right between the gums and the lips. So we're just going to kind of put them right into the little creases that we have separating the 2. We're going to get everything in place and let it dry, and then we can add the head to the body. So I'm going to add those extra wires to the wire frame real quick, and we're going to slide the body over the wire frame. Then we're going to take the fabric for the neck and we're going to start gluing it to the top of the head, and then we're going to have to do a little bit of sewing to the sides, that way the fabric has some stretch, and then we can continue gluing the rest of the fabric around the neck. We're going to let that dry a little bit, and then we can continue stuffing the rest of the body and closing everything up. Lastly, once I had everything put together and it was dried, I realized I wanted to touch up a little bit of the paint on the fabric, so I'm going to add a little bit more red and black to the back of the Mosasaur. Okay guys, and that's how I made a Mosasaur. I had so much fun with this project, especially with the whole opening and closing of the mouth. I had a lot of fun with that, and I can't wait to use it on other creatures. I've had a suggestion where someone wanted me to do a dimorph, and I really like that idea, and I think this would be kind of cool to do with it, to kind of have that mouth open and close, especially since it's just a big old head with a bunch of teeth. And then I've had a bunch of you guys want me to make snakes, so that would be kind of cool to have an opening mouth on that, especially since maybe we can make it where it can swallow something small or something. I don't know, I think that would be a cool idea. Anyways guys, I'm gonna have him along with a bunch of other creatures in my Etsy shop, so check the links down below if you want to buy anything. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!